Hello, welcome to Scrappy Loom Sewing. I'm JC Joellen, and today's video is a remake of my previous Scrapplique video. The reason being, that was the very first video that I ever made, and there's some things that you can't really see real clearly, so I'm hoping to improve upon that. To get started, I want to show you some Scrappliques, so you'll see what this video is about. What it is, I take scraps and I make fabric out of those little tiny scraps, and then I cut out appliques, which I'm calling Scrappliques. So here are some different size circles. Here's a heart, small heart, and then a smaller heart, and a star. Here is a flower and some leaves. And then you could take, say, one of these little circles, put it in the center of the flower before you applique it down, so you can use them in layers if you like. And here's a little tiny butterfly or moth. And here's a larger butterfly. And another butterfly. And then I use these on anything. I use them a lot on quilts, especially baby quilts. But you could use them on anything you'd use a normal applique on. So, to get started, what you will need is a pressing sheet, non-stick pressing sheet, some stitch witchery, and a piece of background fabric, muslin. You could use either bleach or unbleached, but you want some kind of inexpensive fabric to use as a foundation. And then you need some scrap fabrics. And these are scraps that I've cut into squares and rectangles that are about 1 inch to 2 inches in size. I like the smaller pieces because it adds more dimension. If you're making bigger appliques, you could use larger pieces of scrap though. So what you do is you start with your foundation piece of fabric on some kind of a pressing board or ironing board. You want to cover your ironing board first so that you don't get the stitch witchery on it by accident. And then you would take your stitch witchery just slightly smaller than the background fabric so you don't get it on the ironing board. And you will layer it with the stitch witchery. I'm using scraps. You can use any size foundation piece. I usually keep it relatively small just because it's easier to work with. And then what I'm doing now, I didn't have this step in my previous video, but I'm putting it in this one because I just think it makes it a little easier to keep the pieces in place. So then after that, you would take your ironing board, your iron, I mean, and your pressing sheet, and just kind of melt the stitch witchery so that it stays in place. So it's not shifting around when you're adding your fabric scraps. And you can tell when it's adhered because it will change on you. It starts out looking like a web. Let me start this over. It starts out looking like a web. You can see it looks like a spider's web almost. And then my iron wasn't hot enough. And then as it melts, it goes clear. Yeah, there we go. And it doesn't have to be completely melted at this stage. You just want it to stay in place so it's not shifting around when you put your fabric scraps on it. I just found that this makes the process easier to do this first. Okay, that's pretty good. Then you just peel this back. Ideally, I'd wait till it's cool first, which isn't but a few seconds. But once you've done that, you'll take your fabric scraps and layer them in a manner that you find attractive. And you want some variety. You want some variety to add depth. So I'm using lights, mediums, and darks, but all in blues. And see, this one's even a pieced scrap. And that's fine. You can overlap them just slightly. You don't want to overlap them too much. Because if you do, it creates a problem in the next step. I've even got some cotton flannel in here. It's all cotton though, but I've even got a little bit of flannel in there. And that's okay. So you just keep layering them until you've got your background covered up. And then what I would do once I've got so much on here, I would take my iron. I don't want that. I would take my iron, this is a good one, and I will press down what I've gotten on here so far. Nope, 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 nope. Nah. So you can see I just play with it until I get what I am pleased with. And these are strips that I usually try not to put the same fabric up against each other. So that can go there. And then I could take a little small piece of something and put it here. And I'll tell you what I'm going to do and put that here. And I can put this here. Now then what I'll do is take this and adhere it before I go any further. And now I'll use steam. You just hold it on there for a few seconds. You want to press, not iron. So you don't want any back and forth motion here. When you move it, you lift it and move it to another position. And then once I've got that segment nice and secure, I will go to the next one. Now just move all the way down till I get to the bottom of the piece that I'm working on. Hoping to find another one. Yeah, like this. Except I don't want those two pieces together. So there, I'll put that there. That's really saving me time when I find pieces like that. Put that there. Actually, I'll flip that the other direction. Put that there. There's a solid piece. I haven't used that yet. A nice color. Ooh, this one's pretty. I'll put that here. And I'll stick another one of these light blues in here. You want to make sure that there's no background showing through. And the edges, you don't want to overlap very much. They can overlap a little bit, but just a very little. Less than 1/4 of an inch even, ideally. Maybe 1/8 of an inch. Because you don't want your presser foot to go up underneath it. Your free motion pressure foot to go underneath it when you take it to the next step. And so you just choose prints that you like and put them in here until you've got the whole thing covered up. Yeah, I like that all right. I'll put that there. See, I'm going to slide that down because it's overlapping a little too much up top for me there. So what's that one? Put that like that. The reason being I want it to be glued down as much as possible. Like I said, that prevents problems in the next stage. I don't feel that fits in with the rest of them, so I'm not going to put that in there. I like this one. I'll put that there, and I'll also put it there. And then I'm going to put this in here. So you get the idea. It's got a lot of threads hanging loose, and pull those off. Put that there. And that little segment there's overlapping more than I would like, but it's not a big deal. As long as I don't do that too often. Put that in there. And let's see, I'm going to put this here. Then I need to find a couple of small pieces to cover, say, here. And a narrow piece, ideally, to cover this little gap I've got sitting there. Something like this. Put that in there. Except I'm going to snip that long point off. Like that. Now I'm going to go ahead and press these down. So instead of waiting until I've got the whole thing covered to press, I'm pressing as I go. Okay, now we keep on working on this until I had the whole thing covered up. Then I'm going to come back here and I'm going to snip these long pieces off, because they'll just get in the way when I'm stitching it down. It's okay if it hangs over a little bit, that's not a big deal, but you don't want all those really long pieces with no foundation on the background. Okay, so you end up with, I'm going to put this here, a piece of fabric, homemade fabric. That looks something like this. And here I've got some that are completed. Here's a purple. Here's a pink, and I've already cut those butterflies out of this one. And here's a yellow one. Cut the flower of this. Here's a peach. And here's a multicolored one. Here's a green, which you could easily use for leaves and stems. Here's a golden colored one. You could use this for all kinds of things like bark or flowers or birds, whatever. Any of these can be used for any type of applique shape. So the next step is to put the stitching on. See how this has a stipple stitch on it? Excuse me one second. Okay, so this has a stipple stitch, so what we have to do next is that stage. I called it quilting in the previous video. It's really not quilting because it's not layered. But I'm going to go ahead and use this purple one because it's not stitched down, but it's already cooled. So once you've got everything layered on there the way you want it, you will then take it to the sewing machine. And I'm going to show you here. The next step. So I've got my sewing machine set up for a free motion quilting stitch, which means I've dropped my feed dog and I've got a free motion quilting foot on. And then I just want to put my needle down. I've got my threads pulled so they don't get tangled. Move my camera so you can see what I'm doing here. And then all I'm going to do is decorative stitch on top using my free motion quilt. And I want to make sure, so you don't want to go into those overlaps. That's why the less you overlap, the better. Because your foot will get tangled up. And you just stipple stitch all over it. And a stipple stitch is just a swirly stitch, and you try not to cross over. It's not a big deal if you do a little bit here and there, but the idea is not to stitch over top of a previous stitch. And you just go all around. So you've got it quilted down real good, and I try to get the edges really well so that when the project is washed, it does not come loose. You're going to have some fraying because the edges are raw, and that's okay because this is just using up your scraps in a decorative manner. So you just want to, consider what your project is when you're using them. Also, the more quilting you do on them, the less likely they are going to ravel. Backwards on that, because then I would have gone up underneath. Now just go all over this way until I am done. And you end up with, like I say, fabric that looks like this. Then what I do is I take my template shape, whatever that may be, in this particular case, I am going to use a butterfly that I already showed you. And I'll just put it on the back of there, on the front. You can do it on the front or the back, because you're going to cut out on the line. So if you want to know where you're placing it, where your colors are going to show up, you can do it from the front. Otherwise, you just turn it over. Put your shape down, trace it with a pencil or some kind of marker, some kind of marking tool. You don't have to worry about it staying on there because it's going to be on the back side if you're doing it this way. Also, you could use a disappearing marker, but when I'm doing it from the back like this, it doesn't matter. You just want to make sure that it's not something that's going to bleed through. Pencil's not going to do that. Once I've got my shape traced, I'll just take my scissors, cut right on that line there. As carefully as I can. and trim it on out. And you end up with your applique or scrapplique. Scrappy appliques or scrappliques. So, I hope you could see that a little better. I'm new to this video and things, so I'm learning as I go. Wish me luck. And if you enjoyed what you saw, please subscribe and send the video to a friend who likes to sew. Also, if you have any suggestions or comments, put them in the comment section below. Have a very blessed day, and I hope to see you next time. Next time I'm going to be working on a applique quilt using the same butterfly image, but a different type of applique. And isn't that cute? So join me next time. I love butterflies and I love hearts and dragonflies. But anyway, those are just a few of the shapes I love. Those are my favorites. There's others, but those are my favorites that you'll see me probably using a lot. So I hope you like them too. Anyway, have a good day. God bless you. Bye-bye. Much love.